Welcome to video lesson number 18. Today's lesson is on inequalities. For this lesson, of course, you're going to need TOC number 18, the notes you were given in class. You will need definitely a pen or pencil. You could use a highlighter, marker, or colored pencil for this activity for our graphing part of the notes. And this is part of the calculator section, although you're not going to be doing any solving, so a calculator isn't really going to be useful on this lesson. All right, so if you go to your top of page TOC 18, you're going to see a little Pac-Man guy. He is there to remind you that with inequalities, we are using the greater than, less than symbols, and of course, when you're using those to compare, remember that it's like Pac-Man and he wants to eat the bigger number. So the bigger side of the mouth is going to be going toward the bigger number. Okay, that being said, there are three parts to an inequality, and the first part is a variable, meaning an unknown value, and that is represented by any letter except, of course, the letter O. Because we don't use O because it looks too much like a 0. And of course that is just an unknown value that we're not sure what that means yet. The inequality symbol, and there are actually 4 of them, not just 2. You're used to less than or greater than, but we are also going to show you less than or equal to and greater than or equal to, which are the ones in the bottom row. And then the last part is just a number. That is a constant, and it could be positive or negative for inequalities. So it's important that although we haven't taught you how to do operations with integers yet, but you are familiar with what an integer is. Remember, an integer is a positive or negative whole number. Just so you know, an inequality is very similar to an equation. But equations have equal signs, and in place of an equal sign, an inequality has these inequality symbols like you see up here in the middle. And the one big huge difference between an inequality and an equation, other than one has an equal sign and one has the little comparing signs, is that inequalities actually have multiple solutions or multiple answers. And equations only have one solution. So when we solve an equation, we get x equals, and then it's one number. An inequality says that x is less than, or x is greater than 7, or x is less than or equal to 7. So it can be multiple solutions because it can be anything that is less than 7, like 5 or 0, and it keeps going and never stops. So that is a huge difference. Pause the video, take a moment, and write down somewhere on your paper that you want to write down that it has multiple solutions so that you remember that. So that's one of the ways it's different from an equation. All right, in the middle of your page you have an examples box, and I want you to go ahead and add in these 4 examples. If you need to, you can pause the video, but while you're writing them in, I'm also going to explain how you read these, because it's important that you can understand how to read these, because it's not like it's an equal sign. So on the first example, it is read to you as f is greater than or equal to -3, and you'll notice that this greater than symbol has what looks like a half of an equal sign underneath it. That is where the or equal to comes in. And what that means, remember I said they have multiple solutions. So that means that the value of f is anything that is bigger or equal to. So the solutions could be -3 because it says or equal to, and then anything that's bigger or going to the right on a number line. So that would be -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 10, 20, 1,000, anything that's bigger than -3. The second example is, and we're going to always read from the side with the variable. So if you look at which way the inequality symbol is going, the smaller side is pointing to the y. So it's going to be y is less then negative 7. Remember on a number line that when we're looking at them, left is less, so it's going to be anything that's to the left of negative 7. So those solutions include negative 8, negative 9, negative 10, and so on. But notice that negative 7 is not included in the solution because it is not equal to. There's no line underneath that less than symbol. And they will switch the directions of the inequality on you, where sometimes the variable's on the left and sometimes it's on the right, and you need to be able to read and graph it both ways. The third example is read as h is less than or equal to 19. And so since it's equal to, that means that 19 is part of the solution. And then it says h is less. So it's 19 and then anything that's to the left of 19, like 18, 17, 16, and all the way down to into the negatives. And it's important that you know it goes on forever. It doesn't stop. And we'll show that in just a minute when we graph them. All right, the last example is read as x is greater than negative 6. And so it's any number that's to the right or bigger than negative 6. So those examples, oops, I put negative 6. It would not be negative 6, so ignore that. It would be negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, and so on. So negative 6 is not part of the solution there because it does not have the equal to. All right, so when you're graphing an inequality, and we will be graphing these on a number line, what we're going to show you is, again, how to read the inequality symbol, but also it's very important that you notice the difference when it has a line underneath and when it doesn't have a line, because that makes a difference as to whether you draw an open circle or a filled-in circle or a closed circle. So let's look at the first example. That is called a greater than symbol. And we say greater because when you're reading left to right, the greater part, it's pointing to the greater side on the left. So that is a greater than symbol. And since we're talking about numbers that are bigger or greater, we're going to go to the right. But there is no line underneath, so the number that we're starting at is not part of the solution. So we leave that as an open circle saying that's where we're starting, but that number is not part of our solution. Same thing with the second example. That is less than, and like greater than, it does not have the line underneath, so we use an open circle, and since we're going less, we go to the left. And then the two on the right, we have a greater than or equal to symbol, and it has that line underneath. So I like to remember that because it is equal to, and the number is part of the solution, we use a closed circle or filled in circle because that shows that that number that we're starting at is part of the solution. It's included. And then because it's greater than, we're going to go to the right. Same thing with the less than. This one is less than or equal to because it has the line underneath. It looks kind of like half of an equal sign. And so our dot is filled in, saying that that number is part of the solution. And we are going to go to the left because it is less. Make sure you have those all drawn in and think of a way that you can remember when do I use an open circle versus when do I use a closed circle. Just to reiterate this, I said it, but just to reiterate it or repeat it, we read inequalities from the variable. So like I said, they're going to switch the direction on you where they'll put the variable on the right instead of the left, and we'll show you some tricks in class to help you remember that. Okay, so here's the other thing you have to be able to do. You have to be able to read the inequality and then graph it on a number line, but you also have to be able to see it on a number line and write the inequality. So if we look at this one, we notice that we have an open circle, so I know that it's going to be one of the inequality symbols without a line underneath. We know that the number is going to be 2 because that's the number that's circled. So, and I'm in the directions, it says use X for the variable. So x is my variable, and I know since I'm going to the right that x is going to be bigger than 2. So I'm going to, and since it's an open circle, 2 is not included in the solution. So I would write it as x is greater than 2, or if I reversed the direction, and remember I said they will do this to you, you can rewrite it as 2 is less than x with x. But anyway, if you look at it, the bigger part of the inequality symbol is always pointing towards the x. It doesn't matter which way you go, if the x is on the left or the x is on the right. It's always the bigger side of the inequality symbol is pointing to the x. Okay, let's look at another example. In this example, we have a filled in circle, which means that -3 is part of our solution. So the solution shows numbers are bigger or greater than -3, just like in the previous example of 2. But since the circle is filled in, that means -3 is included in the solution. So I would write this as x is greater than or equal to -3. So we put that line underneath to show that -3 could be a possible solution, and then just reverse the order. Just be careful when you reverse the order of the number and the variable that you also reverse the order of the inequality symbol. Make sure you pause the video and get that copied. Third example we have, again, we have the open circle, so my inequality symbol is not going to have a line underneath, but this time the solution shows that the numbers are smaller or less than 0, and the open circle again means that 0 is not included in the solution. So we would write this as x is less than 0, so the smaller point of the inequality symbol is pointing towards the x this time. And then if you reverse the order, again, the bigger part's pointing towards 0 and the smaller part is still pointing towards x. We just switch the order of the numbers and switch the direction of the inequality symbol. Last example, and we will be done, is if you look at this one, this is saying that the solution or the numbers that are part of the solution are smaller or less than 4. And since I'm using a filled in or closed circle, that means that 4 is included in the solution. So we're going to add an extra line underneath the inequality symbol. So in this case, x is less than or equal to 4. And then if we reverse the order of the numbers and the variable and the inequality symbol, we could also write it as 4 is greater than or equal to x. All right, and that is going to be the end of our video lesson. If you could please go ahead and draw 2 stars at the very bottom of your page. That way I know you listened to the video and we will give you full credit.